We are in the aftermath of Nace the movie. We had a wonderful opening scene. I say wonderful because I was like, yes, give us the angst. Nancy not picking up the phone at Icarus Hall, getting to the bottom of the survey bucket, just truly going through it because her and Ace are not together because Ace decided. And then, like, hearing, I think she's screaming, right? And she just goes charging out of the hall.
Did not hear it.
I didn't either, but she heard.
Yeah, I thought it was something with the ice cream or whatever she was eating. I was like, what are we doing? We're in the woods now? Maybe it just wasn't in the screener that we had, and it was... Did you guys watch the airing?
No.
Yeah, I didn't either. Maybe they heard it more on TV than we heard it in the screener.
Because I thought she had an idea. I was like, oh, did we have a breakthrough? Did the bottom of the survey...
Yeah. I thought she was going to go to look out for the sludge in the water or something. As completely independent.
It all happened up so quickly with the man and the things hanging in the woods and the stick.
And then when
she's ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. But when the heads dropped, I was like, oh, this is graphic. And then of course it was a movie set, and yeah, quite a memorable intro for the episode.
A lot happened all at once. I enjoyed it because I was like, what are we doing? What's happening?
Where do I look?
And then Nancy, being like, oh, this is awkward and embarrassing. Well, I thought someone was in danger. Clearly it's not. What are you doing in my woods, though? I do. It isn't true because I wondered, can they not see Icarus Hall? Because he was like, oh, we have a permit. And I was like,
I wondered that too, because even if they have a permit, wouldn't Nancy have had to been like, yeah, you can shoot on my property? But maybe they're just like outside of her property. Who knows how much she owns? We see the deed of Icarus Hall.
We did say we don't know how big the woods outside of it are.
No, and I feel like, but then it also gives like, girl, how long had it been since you exited your house? Because I feel like, wouldn't we have heard trucks or seen people milling about? But apparently not. But it does reintroduce us to Lacey, who is now from being a podcaster to a director on a horror movie called Long Hook.
For her.
The glow up, like the career success. It was wonderful. And her I loved her moment where she was like, in the first movie, the Black guy died in like the first 10 minutes. And now my lead is a Black woman, and we are here. We're taking charge. I was like, give us the representation we deserve, Lacey. Have her kick Long Hook's butt.
Love that. And I was really glad they brought that character back because I really enjoyed her episode in the first place. So I'm glad. I love when a final season pays little tributes to things that came before, because we know a show like Nancy will do it well. And yeah, love seeing her back.
I forgot about her. Is that mean to say? I forgot about the podcast episode, but I was pleasantly surprised when I saw her and I remembered, because I feel like the expectation for, oh, Nancy's old friend comes and she's filming a movie. I didn't think it was that recent of an old friend. I was like, oh, somebody who knew Nancy in high school. That was just my like prediction. But I was like so pleasantly surprised that it was somebody who's in the same like spooky universe as Nancy came back. And I was like, ooh, love this.
Yeah,
we have the history of it as well.
Yeah.
I did like that because I know when I read the synopsis, I was like, oh, are we getting Ace's love interest? Because it seemed like it would make sense for it to be an old friend of Nancy's.
You planted that seed, and it was still in my head when she made her arrival. I was like, oh, but then it was quickly like that's not even going to be a thing.
Yeah, because I was like, that
at least for now.
Could you imagine though the messiness? Lacey's in town shooting Long Hook.
The layers.
And her and Ace connect because she has to do some things at the morgue. Like, I can't. But I thought, so how do we feel about the case of the week at the movie set where we're like, one thing about Nancy, love how Lacey was like, I need a Nancy Drew. And then Nancy was like, I'm a Nancy Drew. And Lacey was like, oh no, I meant I needed one, but I mean, I don't need to have one. Like, you don't have to be here. And Nancy's like, I will be here because I need things to do.
Mm-hmm. Nancy was like dodging those L's. She was like, no, I need a win.
And I thought that was really effective because like she was down on herself. She needed to pick herself back up after feeling that feeling of, I don't even know if rejection is the right word, from not being able to be with Ace just because the curse was still intact and he didn't want to put her in harm anymore. She needed that. She looked like she was post-breakup and she needed that win. And of course then when they said they didn't need a Nancy Drew, it made her feel that kind of rejection again. So I'm glad she stuck to her guns and she got back out there and she dressed like Nancy Drew. She acted like Nancy Drew and she was the Nancy Drew that they needed in the end. Yes, Nancy.
I also think she
Is
got
that-
into her regular clothes because Lacey was like, so that's a
Yeah,
breakup outfit.
yeah.
How are you doing?
She's like, I'm
I
not
thought she
taking
looked
that.
nice.
So did I.
Like, Lacey, that was uncalled for. I didn't even notice what she was wearing. I thought she just had a coat on. What was she
Yeah.
I
wearing?
think it was
Sweatpants?
sweatpants. I think it was like a green
It is
sweatpants
nighttime,
situation.
Lacey.
We were woken up by sounds in the middle of the night.
But I thought what I loved about this episode was the partnering of Ryan and Nancy. He was
Mhm.
such a dad this episode, and a young dad at that. You could tell that he
Second
was
dad is what he said in his voicemail.
yeah,
I had to
dad
rewind that
number
like 3
two.
times. Dad, did he say dad number 2?
Mm-hmm.
I had to rewind it like 3 times to hear what he said.
It was so adorable. He's just like,
It was cute.
he's like, I know you're feeling down, but do you want to like, let's investigate. Let's do some investigation. And I appreciated that his whole thing was like, I'm gonna let you do what you do as far as like you and Ace, though I feel like you can be able to text him if you don't want to. I will text him for you. But I really appreciated how much they were together this episode, especially like, after Lacey she just accepts that Nancy's going to be around, and Nancy figures out something, and she just reaches back for a high five because she knows Ryan's reacting behind her. I love that. It's such a cute little moment, but it spoke to how much they're bonded now.
Mm-hmm.
I love them too. There was one part that I did struggle with, and correct me if I'm not remembering the culmination of the scene, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but she did kind of break down to Ryan later on and be like, what if I can't get over Ace? And he says, you will. Was that like the gist of the conversation? Like he didn't continue, right? Like there wasn't.
Yeah, I feel like he didn't know how to deal with that. So he's like, "Oh, you will," and that was kind of
Yeah,
the
that's
conversation
kind of
just
what
petered out.
Yeah, I didn't really like that response because like I would have liked something a little bit more honest.
Mm.
Like bring in something about how you feel about Lucy or something. Because I was like, telling her you will might be something you think she needs to hear in the moment. But I think Nancy's somebody who respects honesty a little bit more than someone just telling her what she needs to hear. Because I don't think even if she does get over Ace, I think a part of her would always love Ace. And I think that's something that is worth hearing.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Did he bring up Lucy? Well,
I
I
think he
remember
did say something.
Did
it
he
was
bring up? I have
brief.
no idea.
He did say something like, I'm suggesting that he was older now, saying, but I still remember what it was like to feel like that or something. He did put them both on, like, it kind of like, I've been there, I know what it's like, and trust me, you will get over it someday, which definitely added more of a personal touch to it. But I do agree, kind of then pivoted and was like, you know what will help? Movie night, and moved on, which I mean definitely plays into the idea that he's the fun dad of the two, because Carson's definitely helped her with a lot more serious stuff. But I did like that they had a little moment, even if it was brief.
Yeah, I will say though, I enjoy everyone giving Nancy support, but every time we're having a supportive conversation, it seems to be people who've lost somebody, like actual to death. The person who has passed away, they've been laid to rest, and it just feels weird because Ace is very much alive. like you have her dad talking to her about her mom, and him having to live without the person he loves. Ryan, whatever sentence he had about Lucy also passed away. And then you had Lacey talking about her grandmother, who has also passed away. It's like, Ace is alive, though. It's not exactly that equivalent. I know we're grieving like he's gone, but she could text him. Everybody else cannot do that. And so I'm like, will we get a moment where someone is like, girl, I get it, but he's alive and you could text him if you wanted to. Like you could actually have a relationship with him.
She needs to sit down with George.
Yeah.
Yes.
She tell it like it is.
Because I feel like someone should say it. Like I get it. She's grieving the potential of this relationship. But at the same time, everybody who's giving you advice has lost someone that you actually cannot communicate with anymore.
I think George would give her the tough love response that she needs. Nick would give her the gentle love response in the same way, but like gentler. So I think those two she needs to turn to at some point.
Please. it needs to happen. But at least she does have people to turn to. Ace had best kind of this episode, but for the most part, he was isolated because he was working at the morgue. He did participate in the case. He was doing some behind the scenes things with,
which he did at the kind of his own heart, right? No one asked him.
I think George asked Ace to hack Bree's phone.
See, they throw so much stuff in dialogue that I forget it after the scene ends.
There was also did they ask him to figure out what was up with Bree? That might have been out of the kind of he might have taken time out of his looking at cadavers and corpses to figure out what was going on at the house. I can't remember. The plot was plotting, but I was not following some.
Fill in the blanks in the comments for us.
And then I did like the fact he was able to have that conversation with Bess, and his phone was urged about his carrying on work. I mean, they did have some nice serious moments. I love their friendship so much, but it did kind of take me out when it quickly descended into Bess audition, to showing him her audition for the movie. You're not the pizza guy, and she was like so bad at it. And then she did the Australian accent. Oh, mate, you're not the pizza guy. I was like, really?
He was so sweet though.
He didn't know what to say to the Australian one. She's like, oh, maybe not, moving on. But then, of course, Bess was brilliant in the end, and she had to put an extra little dash of realism in that performance when she got hurt by the hook.
Oh, I knew that was coming.
So did I.
Not dragging that. I was
no. Yeah, she was in trouble.
I know they're going to turn real.
But I mean, I always say sometimes I hate that they play Bess for laughs. Perfect example of them doing it right. That's the kind of humor I like to see from Bess.
And she got to balance too, because, we had those humorous moments, but when we were on set and they were dividing up tasks and they had to go interview everybody, Bess was like, most people I talked to seemed fine, but there was this guy. And so they went to go talk to him about the previous director on Long Hook and his behavior on set, which is true to life for some sets. Unfortunately, there are some directors who should not be working right now. But was interesting to see Bree's part in this from back in like 30 years ago. How long ago was it? It was a while ago.
30. It was 93.
30.
30. Have to get real.
30 years ago. When just to see, how intense that set was, and to the point where she let this man die in the bathtub when it was just supposed to be a prank because she hated him so much. I am intrigued by why exactly people's memories of terrible things they've done have been erased and replaced with good memories, and they get everything back once they drink the sludge in the water. As first of all, who erased the memories and why? Second of all, why does the sludge care to remind them of what they actually did?
I feel like so we learned that there's a thing called the Black Room. We don't know what that is. So I assume that's what was responsible for taking the memories from people and replacing them with happy ones. But does that come at a cost? We don't know. But I do feel like that whatever this sludge is, whatever this danger is, this is why I find it so interesting. It might be the most interesting kind of mystery they've tackled so far, is that it seems like it's unearthing the town's deeply buried secrets. Everyone's talking about how the supernatural is kind of coming into the conversation more often, because everyone kind of just like nod and winked at the fact that they were just superstitious ceremonies, whereas now everyone's starting to accept that the supernatural is all around us. The police chief, who I'm sure we'll drag in a few moments, is terrified of the supernatural, even though she's accepted that it exists. Everyone's secrets are starting to come out. I don't know what the sludge is, but it sounds like it's trying to pull the dark history of Horseshoe Bay out into the light. And obviously it'll be up to the Drew crew to either help it do that or stop it from doing it before someone gets hurt. And the fact we're 4 episodes in and don't know much about it, that's a good mystery to me. The pacing's been very well on that front, and I can't wait to see where it goes next.
Yeah, I don't know. The water's stressing me out because anytime somebody's drinking anything, I'm like, where did you get like when they handed Lacey a cup of coffee at the Claw after she survived her stabbing? What happened? She ran into a window. She was pushed into a window. Regardless, when they handed her that cup of coffee, I was like, what did you make that coffee with? I'm like, I'm scared about anybody drinking water in this town. Is it just the water at the Claw? Is it all water? I don't know. I'm stressed about the water.
It's none of the water in Horseshoe Bay is safe at this point. Like,
it's terrifying.
It's very terrifying. George and Nick have been buying water bottles, which I'm not sure.
What if you're taking a shower and you open your mouth and you ingest? I'm scared. I'm not even there, and it's fictional.
Real questions though.
It is, because like they had that big the assistant director was talking about how they had this big jug of tap water because the other assistants are really about being green, and they were just chugging that They were just drinking. I think did he say he told them to stop drinking, and once he realized that, we were getting black veins on her neck and something was weird. It's also terrifying because Lacey had nothing to do with what was happening on the original Long Cook. Might not have even been alive. And she is still having to take on what happened with that director because her people had been affected by the sludge and were ready to kill her in Icarus Hall. Which, by the way, I don't understand how Nancy's living there by herself because that place is spooky. It's not a corner in it.
It's so scary. I'm like, why did we not renovate? Let's throw our grief into DIYs. Log into Pinterest, Nancy.
Put some wallpaper up.
Paint a wall. Did we clean when we moved in? I don't know. It's really spooky still to me. And
take the big dungeon doors down. We don't need those.
Oh my God, right? Install some cameras. I don't know. Like, how has Carson not done that?
No, because the other thing, this is the same hall, right, where people got slaughtered. Yeah. And was that season 2 when they with Tom's episode?
Yep.
And like Nancy, were cool because you actually literally do have a dungeon in the basement. Like that's like right there, and there was blood there. So
if we had a bigger time, John, I'm not going to get into time, but we could have returned to Nancy and Icarus Hall with full renovation. New drapes, some colorful rugs, something to brighten the place up.
All we've like, got
how
is
has Bess not
sign.
jumped in there and been like, we're flipping this place? Why hasn't Bess moved in? Where's Bess living? Do we know?
No.
Probably at the Historical Society because isn't it an actual house?
I guess that makes sense.
I don't know, but
I wouldn't want to stay there either.
Nancy needs a roommate.
She does. Bess could be the roommate because you know what? They're both staying at places with magical objects, and they both seem to be fine about it.
Let's, strength in numbers. Buddy system.
Yes, I mean they're gonna need it too with the sheriff. To go back to the sheriff, because she's very intense about we're not doing this here. It's like avoiding the fact that there's supernatural things here is not going to make the supernatural things go away. They're here.
I
to
love
stay.
that scene for Bess where she stood her ground.
Yes, she's very much like, you need to know that knowledge is power. What do you mean you don't want to do things? She's like, well, I'm not going to let it affect the town. It's like, it's already affecting the town. Did we not get the binder? The big Horseshoe Bay Bible letting you know all the weird things that happened in town? You arriving doesn't change the fact that ghosts walk around here daily.
This is she's clearly very by the book and wants to fight fire with water, and that's not how it works in Horseshoe Bay. If there's something supernatural happening, you need to stop it with a supernatural cure. And Bess is obviously the key to that. I did say I wanted to see more of her getting to be a witch, and I think we will get to see that as the season progresses, which is good. Could she get into trouble with the law for practicing magic when it's the only way to stop dangerous things from happening? That's a good hook. I can't wait to see that.
And the stomach pump broke.
Yeah, right. We were laughing the other day about how it was always their answer, but they don't have it anymore.
But that gets us. We're gonna get Tristan, I feel like, next episode because they need him to. They mentioned him.
They did, and I forgot
not to bring the vibe down for the rest of the true crew out there.
But they know that we're fine with Tristan. It is going to be interesting though to see, how he's gonna interact with everybody. If he is in the next episode, I don't see why he wouldn't be, because this seemed like the Nancy's gonna choose to move on and move forward episode. So that feels like Tristan's gonna be she's gonna be knocking at Tristan's door. They'd be like, I broke the stomach pump, but I also need something else. I think they're gonna be cute as an interim situation.
Yeah.
I think Nancy needs that. Just to get her mind off of everything. Isn't that one of Dua Lipa's rules?
Yes, and her new rules.
Just gonna say.
But to go back to the way you saw the season, Reed, the first quarter was obviously all about the storyline. I agree. I feel like these next 3 episodes for Nancy would be the grief, the distraction, and then the acceptance. And then we'll move into the next chapter, which will be crossing paths with this again. If the distraction is our next chapter, I do feel like that'll be Tristan and Nancy will end up on a very maybe Nancy and Nace mission together. And then feelings will be felt, conversations will be had, and then we'll see where that takes them. And I agree. We're early in the season. We know how it's going to end. Let's have a little fun while we're here,
Yeah.
because watching Nancy and Ace be miserable isn't fun. We don't want that. So if we have to distract them for a little while, distract them. But we know they'll find their way back to each other at the end. So enjoy Tristan while he's here. Enjoy whatever it is Nancy and him get up to, whatever mysteries they're on, however the glasses factor into it. I'm all for it, because just we don't have many episodes left. Live in the moment.
I know. Just enjoy it. And it's really, I think that relationship's going to be enjoyable. They're cute. Like, I don't think obviously there are going to be people who would prefer to see Ace and Nancy grow, which I get that because it is the final season. But I feel like we should just accept that Tristan is here. But don't take pleasure in his near-death experience, because he is going to have that "you're not going to die in the woods" moment, which I'm so intrigued to find out what it is that he's suffering from in these woods whenever we get to it.
And perhaps this relationship or whatever it becomes with Tristan will circle back to the conversation with Ryan that I have a slight issue with, where maybe she's dating Tristan and she realizes, oh, I'm not going to get over Ace. So maybe that's where that comes in.
Maybe. But there is something that I want to talk about off pod that I just had a thought about. That'll stay between the three of us.
Love that.
Can't wait.
I think so. What else with this? We
George
did cover
and
the
Nick.
mystery. Yes, thank you. The Fanson. The Fanson was. It got better towards the end, but that arguing in the beginning, because they literally, their lives are so intertwined that they have friction now, because he's like, George, I don't want to do this, and she's like, you changed. She's like, it's been one episode. He has not changed. He just doesn't want you tracking a woman's phone.
Yeah, and I struggled with them something serious. This was back to the old. We didn't enjoy watching them in this back half of the season 3 because they were always arguing about silly things, and it was like they weren't addressing the main problems. This felt exactly the same as that. I love seeing them on screen paired together. The second half of this episode was a delight, but the first half was not. I feel like Nick was downplaying how smart and intuitive he is just to force the storyline, because I do think he would have. Yes, he has morals. He doesn't like hacking people's phones. But if he was worried about someone, he absolutely would have suggested Ace do that. Whereas all of a sudden, he was like, you asked Ace to do what? That's a crime. That's something you would never do. And I'm like, actually, it is. You've done it all the time. And then George, we know George can get angry, and they've played on that for laughs or whatever. And they kind of really, really doubled down on that this time. So I feel like they had them both, like they have like caricatures of themselves just to force the conflict so they could have that conversation and then realize, actually, we like spending time together. And I'm like, if they wanted space, could we not just have separated them for a few episodes instead of having them on screen arguing again? Because that was the whole problem with them in the first place.
Remind me, where did they land?
Like, they're best friends now.
Oh.
She was like, you're my best friend. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, okay.
And he was like, we don't need space anymore.
I actually felt like George could have been on her own for this episode. Because she really was the driving force of their part of figuring out what happened. I feel like Nick kind of just got dragged along, and then he became more of an important figure in it once we got to Brie and we started having a conversation with her. And it just seemed to be a way to fuel George once again, telling him he needs to lead the council.
Yeah.
And I feel like if he's not on board about that, though, I think we should stop pushing it. Because he doesn't seem like he's all the, like, I think he doesn't mind having a seat at the table, but I just feel like he doesn't want to lead right now, which is fine. He's like, what, 22? He doesn't have to lead the entire Horseshoe Bay Council. I think having a seat is fine if that's all he wants.
I think we need, if that's going to be the game plan, I think we need at least one more episode where he comes to that decision himself, or something happens or he realizes like, oh, this is something that they need and I want, and that will better my life trajectory. I just don't want him to, like you said, I don't want him to be pushed into it because of convenience and because of George's convictions.
Especially because she was the one, what did she have a line about how she said she was the one who wanted to do something about the town, but he has the bigger presence. It's like, well, girl, you could sit on the council then. Like, do you have to run or something? Like, or I don't know what she has to do here. I mean, that obviously in other, like in real life, you have to run for a council seat, but apparently Nick can just show up here.
In this moment, I'm realizing like the growth of these 5 characters and like how much they've like fanned out. Like obviously Nancy's still doing her investigative thing. Nick is primed to be a figurehead in this government. We got Bess in the historical society. George knows the law now, and Ace is in the morgue. They've got their feet planted in all corners of where they need them in this town. That's incredible from where they were in season 1?
Especially
struggling to run a diner together.
And it all took place in less than a year. Growth.
Michael, we can't talk about time.
But I mean, there really is though, because like the Claw might not be the place to be during like the morning or lunch hours, so they do have some clientele, but nighttime they are booked and they are busy. And I still know, like, because George just ran out of the restaurant and she's like, we have to figure out what's happening with Bree, and Nick is like closing folders, I think is what he was doing. And I was like, so we can let the staff know that both bosses are out of the building, or are they on their own? We sink in this woman by ourselves? Probably.
I'd wonder if they will address that, because like both of them now have full-time commitments elsewhere, and yet when they agreed that they'd run it together, they agreed that that would be a full-time commitment. So how are they out here juggling all of this at once? Like, I want the time they have. How do they manage that?
Yeah, perhaps they hired a new manager off screen and it's just not important to the plot.
Yet who knows?
I'd see that. I would want to see her though. Just like I want to see
give
the
us a
bagel shop.
sentence. Yeah.
We need to see the manager at the Claw, and we need to see the bagel shop before the series finale. I hope so. I mean, I'm really manifesting that. I can't take it to the mall because everything's finished and just sitting to be aired. So